We are going to use the same system that we used in regular class while we learned virtually. So although we are moving on to scatter plots, which you're going to need this booklet out, there's page 1. There's page 2. There's page 3. And finally, page 4. So you'll need to find that, which I believe is under your first day if it's stapled together. Before we start scatter plots, we're going to look at this question. So I'm going to put this on big screen so you can see everything. And the question is to circle the shapes that are prisms, and then also answer a second question, which is which ones are pyramids. So can you tell which ones are prisms? So think about that for a sec. If you need to, you can pause this video and think about it, and then I can come back and take care of this. But I'm going to keep motoring because I don't need to pause. All right, so prisms. Prisms are the same shape all the way up or down the picture, assuming that you have laid it on the proper side. Pyramids, on the other hand, change as they go up the picture. They also come to a point, not an edge, a point. So when we're looking at these questions, just a color code, prisms I'm going to do in red. This would be a prism because as it's situated, it would be a circle all the way up and down if you looked down upon this picture. This one would be a square or a rectangle, depending on if it's a cube or just a box. So that's a rectangular prism. That's a cylinder. And this would be the same figure all the way on the up and down. This one would not. Regardless of what face you put this on, you would have a different shape depending on where you cut it. Here's another prism. This would be a rectangle or a square, depending on where you cut it. And this one's situated perfectly as well. It would be a triangle, regardless of where you cut it and you look down upon it. Then let's look at our pyramids. So our pyramids, I'm going to color in or circle in blue. This is a pyramid. That's your typical pyramid. And it might be a square-based pyramid. It could be a rectangular-based pyramid. And last of all, this one is a pyramid. It is a circle-based pyramid, but it still comes to a point rather than an edge. So an edge, just to go back to my red, here's an edge. Here's an edge. Even in this triangle, there's an edge, there's an edge, there's an edge. It's not a point. So, the last one on the list is this one. It's none of the above, so it's not a prism, it's not a pyramid. That guy right there is a sphere. It has no relationship to any of these other than the fact that it's circle-based, as in not a base of a circle, but it's made up of many, many circles. All right, let's move on to scatter plots. So I can't have this on big screen, otherwise I'm never going to be able to take care of this question. So I'm going to put it back to what I usually have it on, which is this. So the question is, you're given a table of values, so a bunch of values in a table. You're given a grid, the units are given to you, and the scale is given to you. And it says, is there a relationship between the time studying, which is in minutes, and the mark on the exam for this particular set of data? So given this data about studying and marks, answer the following questions. So we're going to answer those questions. before we do, we have to answer part A, which is to graph the data below. So I am going to put it right here and go over what's necessary. So the first thing that's necessary is that you have a scale, and it obviously, based on this picture, does not have to have the same scale on the Y up and down axis as the side to side axis, the X axis. So this one goes up by, let's say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. So it started way down here at the corner, which is 0, and somebody picked a scale that lets us get to 100 with a reasonable amount of boxes. This one is not going up by 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. This one, if this is 100, has to be 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. 120, 140, 160, 180, 200, etc. And while I'm bringing your attention to what's on these two sides, this one is called the independent variable. And the independent variable always sits here. And this one is the dependent variable. And the dependent variable always sits here. So what that means is that the mark on the exam depends on the time you spend studying in a perfect world. It doesn't go the other way. The time you spend studying does not depend on the mark that you get on the exam, because you study before the exam. So the independent variable is always the first column and the x-axis, and the dependent variable is always the second column and the y-axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig out blue, and I'm going to start putting these dots on the picture. So I have to go over to the 120 mark and then up to 53. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, all the way up to here. So there's 50. There's 120, 52, 53. And I may be off because I'm using a tablet that is not exact. Next one, 340, which is over here, and 62. So I'm going to go up like this because I have the erasability. So there's 60. So there's 62. So now I'm going to take my eraser and erase what I don't need, which is all of that, and I'll leave that behind. Now I want to double check to see if that's actually 62. I think that's 64. There. So this is going to take me a little bit of time. I'll do a few more and then I'll pause and come back after I put on all the dots, because this is tricky for me to take care of without having the smartboard in front of me and following. So the next one is 520, which is here. Minutes studying, and 86, so here's 82, 84, 86 here. So I have to follow this across, and I have to follow this up, and I have to put a dot where they cross. And then all this stuff is stuff that kind of happens with my finger. Same here. Oh. So all I actually need is the dot. And although I'm trying to be exact, it's tough. There we go. Oh, I think that's, yep, no, that's good. So 170. 170 is here. 120, 40, 60, 70. And 49 is almost to 50. And then I can go across here. And I can go up here. And I can take a little pause so that hopefully my dot stays away from my lines. And I get that. Now, you should be putting in some effort to be exact, but this grid is not as good as having actual graph paper. Because the boxes are just a little small. I'll do one more. 250. For 20, 40, 50. And 70. Oh, that's easy. And a little bit too far. Pause so I can get my dot separated from the lines. Hey, that worked that time. Okay, so I'm going to pause and I'll come back when I'm done all the dots. So I have to start up with 275, 64. I'll put on all my dots and we'll get our scatter plot. So as you can hopefully see, it's called a scatter plot because you're plotting dots and they're kind of scattered a bit. So, pause for me. Okay, I'm done graphing my dots. Something I did was double check how, or if I've got all the right information on it, as in the correct amount of information. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pairs of data. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 dots on my grid. So I've covered all the points. Now let's look at the questions. So the first question is, what are the features of a good graph? So the first feature of a good graph is making sure that you have a consistent scale on both x and y-axis, meaning that you go up by the exact same amount every single tick mark, starting at 0, and you're going up by the exact same amount on this one. So you don't have to have the same amount on the x, independent variable axis, as you do with the y, the dependent variable axis, but this has to be the same as each other, and this has to be the same as each other. So if you had started 100 here, and then gone 120, 140, 160, 180, 200. That's not a consistent scale because here you made 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, each box is 20, and this one is 50. So that's not a consistent scale. You have to decide on something right from 0 and keep going until the end of your axis, both on the x and the y. The next thing you need to have a good graph, and this is outside of putting all the dots on it, is you need labels on the x and y axis. So I'll draw your attention to these labels. This axis is called the time spent studying, and I'm telling you it's in minutes, not in hours. On the up and down, it's the mark on the exam, so it's implied that it's out of 100%. And then the last thing that's a feature of a good graph is an overall title. So this graph had all the stuff given to you to begin with. Marks and Studying is the overall title. So that's for every graph. Then the next question is the trend of the data describes the direction of the points. So how would you describe the trend for these points? And I hope that you can look at these and see that all these things are going uphill. So starting from the left and going to the right, these points are going uphill. And that means that we get to say that this particular graph has an increasing trend. The next one is kind of a fill in the blank. So underneath here or above, depending on where I have the most amount of room, I will explain how to say this. So it says, as the relationship of the graph describes how the two variables are connected. So how the time spent studying is connected to the mark on the exam. So as the time spent studying increases, the mark on the exam also increases. So what you want to do is you want to talk about as, and then you mention the independent variable, and you always say the independent variable increases. Then you list the dependent variable, and it's either going to increase or it's going to decrease. It's one or the other, but it can't be both. So in this question, as the time spent studying increases, these also go up, so we have an uphill climb on our dots. As opposed to if this was increasing and our dots did this. So as we're increasing, this would be going downhill, so you'd say that it's decreasing. Never ever draw a line the way I drew a line. You need to draw lines with rulers. So your X and Y axis has to be drawn with a ruler. And I'll show you what else has to be drawn with a ruler in a minute. So I'm just getting rid of all the extra junk I put on this picture. There. And then the last question says, describe the meaning of the point 520, 86. So first thing I want to do is I want to check to see, is it in here? Yes, it is in here. So I'm not making up a new piece of data. It's sitting right here. So when I take it out of the chart, I can say 520, 86. So your independent variable gets named first and your dependent variable gets named second. So what that means is that if you study, or this person studied for 520 minutes and they ended up getting 86% on the exam. So that's not everybody who studies 520 minutes gets 86% on the exam. That's this one particular person. So down here, I'm going to write, it means that one student studied for 520 minutes, so not hours, minutes, and earned 86% on the exam. So I'm going to take a little break and stretch my hand, check to see if I've missed anything, because I do think I've missed one thing, and then I'll come back and talk to you about the second question.